When something reminds traumatized people of the past, their right brain reacts as if the traumatic event were happening in the present. Bessel van der Kolk.
Bending, Not Breaking. Season 2, Episode 16. Appa's Lost Days. And welcome back to another episode of Bending, Not Breaking. I am Sunshine Mayfield.
This is Ben Pruitt.
And we are talking about Appa's Lost Days. But before we do that, we've got someone else we need to welcome. The one, the only, Max Gongaware. Welcome back, Max.
Thank you.
I can't tell you how grateful I am for you and the work you do to help us sound good. And I just appreciate you, Max.
Could be my last episode.
What?
My power adapter on my computer is not working.
Oh, well let's fix that.
What are you, Mr. Electricity?
Can we order
Who
a
are you,
new
George Washington Carver?
Can we order a new power adapter?
On Airbnb? Or what is this podcast called?
On Bending Not Breaking?
B&B, yeah.
Yeah, we have a Patreon.
That's
It's
going to buy me a new...
patreon.com/thearchive, and you can donate and you can help us with things like buying Max a power adapter for his computer.
Slide in my DMs and I'll send you the details.
Okay.
Well, we just gave the details. It's patreon.com/thearchive.
Right, but they don't know what kind of power adapter I need.
Yeah, but do you know how Patreon works?
Not a clue.
They donate money to support us. They get bonus content.
No, I want them to straight up buy me a power adapter.
And then with the money that helps
We will
support the
buy
show,
you
we
the-
would buy the
yeah.
power adapter.
What if I want one of our fans to just buy me a power adapter?
Well, maybe you need to be a little bit more charming.
Talk about a power shift.
Also, we're curious what kind of incentives y'all would be interested in.
Ooh, that's
So
great.
what are the tiers that y'all would interested in? Would you be interested in some B&B merch?
Maybe they want us to buy them power adapters.
Would
Like
you be
a
interested
mug?
in a one of the podcasts I really enjoy? It's called You Have Permission. If you donate $5 a month on their Patreon, you get to be a part of the Facebook group. And what they do is there are weekly discussions, and based off of the episodes, and then so Dan Koch, the host, actually is a part of those conversations, is answering questions. And is that something that you'd be interested in?
We could let you choose a lens for next season.
Yeah,
that could be fun.
We would love that.
I love long sleeve shirts with the writing on the sleeves. That's my fad right now that I'm into.
And so, just to make it tangible, we really are interested in having your support. And if you aren't willing to donate financially, maybe you can give us a 5-star review on iTunes. What is thinking about last episode? What's the service that you can do with the means that you do have available to you? And if this is something that you want to serve, remember, service begets service.
Always. All right, let's get into Max's uninformed recap. This should be easier, seeing as how he's not trying to tell us 6 different plots this time.
Theoretically.
So it
To
should
be fair,
easier.
I wasn't trying to do that last time either.
Yeah, you were just that far off last time.
We bought a zoo.
Well, and Toph is a girl.
Noted. All right.
So for your future recaps, Toph is a girl.
I can't believe we forgot to mention that last week.
Yeah. That's how far off you were. Just watch the show.
Doubt it.
If you donate to Bending Not Breaking, we will kidnap Max and force him to watch an episode.
That's not funny.
That's for
We will not
fair.
actually kidnap him.
I just want him to watch.
But if you donate a certain amount, Max, what would it cost for us to get you to watch an episode with us?
20 power adapters.
Is that your only currency?
Currently, yes.
All right. Let's join in. Are you ready for your clues for your uninformed recap?
Sure.
Opening scene. Appa gets kidnapped by sandbenders. Final scene. The Dai Li use a bison whistle to capture Appa as he flies into Ba Sing Se. Your keywords.
Well, you're going to have to give me that. Give me that closing. The Dai Li?
The Dai Li use a bison whistle to capture Appa as he flies into Ba Sing Se.
To capture Appa
as he flies.
As he flies into Ba Sing Se.
These are characters that we've definitely mentioned before. This shouldn't be like new things to
Who
you.
is Ba Sing Se?
And he's not. That's a place, Max.
All right.
Your keywords are merchants, circus, Kyoshi warriors, starving, and message. You've got 1 minute on the clock. Are you ready?
Yeah.
And away we go.
All right. Well, obviously the episode begins when Appa gets kidnapped by sandbenders. And when they kidnap him, they take him to Diagon Alley. And they talk to all the merchants that are there, including the one Ollivander who sells wands. And wands are also sometimes sold to the circus because the conductor has to make the
30
elephants
seconds.
do whatever he wants. And at this particular circus, there's also a bunch of Kyoshi warriors. And the only reason that they do anything that they're asked to do is because that they are starving and they're motivated by food. And that food sends a message to them that they're supposed to do what
10
they're
seconds
supposed
left.
to do, or else the Dai Li will use a bison whistle to capture Appa as he flies into Ba Sing Se.
Perfect. Well done.
I nailed it.
Some of you got moments that actually happened in the show just with like different characters and things. Like there are circus moments in there where food is withheld to help them do things. So like, not bad.
Thank you.
Way to use context clues.
Could have been worse.
Could have been worse. Could have been worse. And we're going to talk today about trauma, the lens of trauma as we go through this episode.
So first things first.
We should recap it the right way.
No, that's not what I was going to say.
Okay.
But we can do that.
You need to recap it the right way. You've got 30 seconds.
Great.
On your mark, get set, go.
Appa has a series of traumatic events in this episode.
Boom.
Okay, so he's drugged against his will.
You're
He's
down to
kidnapped.
15
He's
seconds.
caged, starved, whipped with fire. He goes to a circus. Then he escapes from the circus. There's a little kid that's like, "Oh my God, you're cute!" And then he says, "You can do it."
10
He goes
seconds.
away. Then he gets beaten. Oh my God, Kyoshi warriors find him. He's been, "Oh my God, no!" And then Azula, "Oh my
5
God!"
seconds.
And then Guru Patik, super cool, waits patiently and sends him
Done.
back to Aang.
Half your recap was you being like, and oh my God!
Yeah, but I really nailed it in the first 10 seconds.
Yeah. Appa goes through some traumatic things. Let's talk about trauma, shall we?
Yeah, so first things first, I feel obliged, and that is really important to emphasize that neither Sunshine nor I nor Max is an expert on trauma.
Absolutely.
Our level of training is limited to the number of books that we have read, which frankly is not nearly enough to...
Couple trainings here and there, but
Yeah.
nothing. Yeah.
And so we are speaking from what we do know, and we're speaking from the books that we have read, and that's it. So we may say something that is, and we may have said something on the show before that is
problematic. Yeah.
but this lends itself to potentially problematic statements.
Well, I think we're learning as we go through this as well, right? So there have been moments where people have corrected us, and
That's true.
And we want that to happen because we want to be better as we host the show, and we want to learn. That's part of the reason we're doing it, and so we were just glad you're on this journey with us.
Yeah, so-
but please keep us in check when you hear us say things that may or may not be true, or things that we think are true based off of our experiences, but we know there's other perspectives out there.
Yeah.
Perfect. I think that's worth highlighting.
So with that in mind, one of the things I want to kind of talk about is the concept of big T trauma versus little t trauma. Are you familiar with that?
No.
So big T trauma is
Capital
like
trauma.
sure, like capital T trauma is generally accepted is around this concept is that big events that have the potential to cause a PTSD response. So typically it is a larger experience-based thing that happens that is a one incident versus little t trauma, which is trauma over time from smaller incidents that happen over a series of a longer period.
So the language I've heard around that are the three types of trauma: acute trauma, which is a singular incident; chronic trauma, which is the repeated, prolonged things like domestic violence and abuse.
Yep.
And then complex trauma, which is exposure to varied and multiple traumatic events, often invasive and interpersonal nature.
Yeah.
So it seems like that's kind of what you're talking about.
Yeah, I've read that in multiple arenas,
Nice.
and I just wanted to like have that available to us. I think language is important when talking about subjects like this, and so just anytime we reference things like this, I just want us to be aware of our language.
Well, and it's interesting because when you're thinking about it from a medicinal purpose, a physical injury is trauma, right? Like,
Yep.
that's trauma. From a psychological aspect of it, a deeply distressing or disturbing experience. And I think it's kind of key to understand that, like, you don't necessarily get to dictate what is traumatizing towards someone
and
else.
I think that's extremely important because what is traumatizing for me is not traumatizing for you necessarily.
Right.
And what is traumatizing to a 5-year-old child may seem like nothing to us.
And it kind of even goes back to the moments of, I was spanked when I was a kid, right? I turned out fine.
Exactly.
I'm glad you're okay. Like, I'm glad you're fine.
That does not
That
mean-
does not mean it's not traumatizing for someone else. So we don't get to dictate that as the people not experiencing that feeling or emotions.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that's worth highlighting as well.
100%.
And I think we see so many moments of that with Appa throughout this show.
And I think what's really troubling is if you are familiar with, I know that you're intimately familiar with ACEs,
yes,
right?
adverse childhood experiences.
So one of the biggest points of research from that whole list of research about ACEs is that if you experience one of those indicators, you are more likely to experience others, correct?
And more likely to then cause that trauma onto others.
Yeah.
But
And
yes.
and so what I noticed throughout this episode is because of this one incident, Appa being kidnapped, that led to a series
Of other traumatic
of
events.
other traumatic events that were, some of them depending on Appa's perspective, but some of them may or may not have been worse than the original trauma, right?
Of being kid. And honestly, I would argue that
I would argue that they are worse, right?
They are
but
worse.
Again, we are not Appa, right? But based off what we see, I think that it is indicative that one trauma puts us in a pool of being more likely to experience other traumas.
Yeah.
And I think that's slightly terrifying.
Based off of the data that's out there, that's a very true statement. As we even talk about ACEs, these are adverse childhood experiences are potentially traumatic events that occur in childhood somewhere between the ages of 0 and 17. Experience violence or abuse, witnessing violence in a home or community, having a family member die, or parents getting divorced, all these substance misuse, mental health problems are these things that can lead to this. And I think it's also worth highlighting that they cause, not only when they're physical in nature cause a physical response, but even the ones that are emotional in nature have a biological response to them in the way that the bodies handle that. The body knows the score, right?
Body keeps the score.
Yep.
Yeah. Excellent book, by the way.
Let the body know the score. Let the body know the score. Let the body know the score. Thank you.
Yeah, so lots of all things worth highlighting as we're talking about Appa's experience as he's going through this show.
Yeah.
And I think there are several moments that are pretty vividly traumatic for Appa.
Absolutely.
And we see that fear in him. And I would love to give praise to Suki.
All right. Let's start there. Give us more.
Just off the way that she recognized Appa's trauma and respected the boundaries that Appa was setting, and continued to kind of work to prove herself as a safe individual, so that she could help him. But she recognized that it took a lot of steps to get there. It took not creeping in on him. It took leaving him food. It took all of these things before she could actually help pull the needles out of him after his
We
attack
see
with
another example of that.
Yeah, tell me more.
So Guru Patik, right?
Yeah.
So I was so amazed with the amount of patience this guy had upon Appa arriving at the air temple. Like, he was waiting for him to arrive. He was waiting for him with Aang, to be fair, but he was waiting for him to arrive. And Appa was clearly not okay. And Guru Patik was like, okay, I'm just going to lay here. And he laid there for an entire day until Appa was asleep. And then recognized what was going on, left him food, waited patiently for Appa to come to him. It was not a, hey, let me fix you.
Right. It was a, let me create the stage.
Let me create
the
space.
environment for this. Let me create
Exactly.
the container for this to happen.
And I think that's incredibly important. And I think we see Suki acting more quickly, and Appa reacted to that. But then Appa, in this situation, experienced even more lacking of trust and doesn't know Guru Patik, where he knows Suki, right? And so it's really interesting to see.
It's interesting how the environmental safety factors, I feel like, come into play when it comes to taking care of him. At the air temple, there's a little bit more safety there. There's a little bit more time there. Him in the shelter in the Earth Kingdom, when we know that there are...
He's like in a corner.
We know that there are threats around him.
Porcupines.
Porcupines, and we see the triad. We see Azula and Ty Lee and May show up. And so, like, what would have happened if the Kyoshi Warriors really took their time in that moment? Like, they needed to get him into a safe space, which is an interesting concept. But the line, and I name the character again for me, because I can never...
Guru Patik?
Guru Patik, thank you. The line that I think that really sticks with me from him is this moment where he personifies the space in your body where things belong. And he kind of talks about the physiological nature of what trauma does, and he says it, and I think it's a perfect representation of fear has moved in where trust should be.
Yes.
And that line is heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Especially when you put in the context of
trauma
and other people in the real world, not just Appa, but that moment of fear has replaced this place in your body where trust should be, and that's exactly what's happened. And you see Appa react in these moments where he could normally be trustful, and he's reacting out of fear. The woman who comes into the hut, who's just like trying to see what's going on, and she brings the torch, and Appa...
Well, in that moment, we need to dissect what Appa is experiencing.
Yeah.
Right? So, like...
It's a rehash of everything he's already felt.
The quote at the beginning, when something reminds traumatized people of their past, their right brain reacts as if the traumatic event were happening in the present.
Yeah.
Right? So Appa has, at this point in the episode, been whipped and burned and controlled and manipulated by this fire whip that has been like burned into his mind. And now, whenever he sees fire, his body, the body experiences... Like the brain sends the same chemical message that he experienced when that fire was actually whipping him.
Yeah, it's literally fight or flight,
right? It's not just that. Yeah. Like his brain is sending pain signals to his body, right? He is experiencing that all over again. And I'm like, if this is that trauma that we expect it to be and what it appears to be, then that's what's happening in his body right now, and that's important to realize
that he's in physical pain even though nothing is physically happening.
Exactly. And it's one of those things where that mental awareness, even though Appa might be able to logically say, oh look, that's not this fire whip guy, that is a torch, like his brain isn't literally able to do that. He cannot see that.
The flame is a trigger.
It's a trigger, and then he goes into that state, and even when he's thinking about something else, right? There's a really great episode of The West Wing if y'all are West Wing fans, where Josh Lyman has been
Love
shot.
me some Sorkin.
So Josh Lyman has been shot.
That's a big spoiler for people who have not watched The West Wing, Ben.
It's season 1 from like 30 years ago. So moral of the story is Joshua Lyman, awesome
like
character.
22 years ago.
Sorry, gets shot. And he survives, and he's experiencing post-traumatic stress disorder, and you find that out. And there's a whole episode dedicated to how he is experiencing it, right? But what happens is he heard, like, he saw the fan blades or something like that reminded him of the trauma that he didn't even realize is what reminded him of it. Mm-hmm. Or a siren outside reminded him of X, Y. I don't remember what the exact trigger was, but something that had nothing to do with the actual incident
set him off.
Yeah. And he had no idea why. But this therapist that came in, this trauma expert that came in, was able to help him diagnose that and see what was going on and work through it. Granted, he worked through it much faster than most people would experience that, but it's a really good episode nonetheless. Highly recommend the show West Wing, period, by the way.
Sorkin is amazing.
Newsroom, oh my God.
Going through and rewatching that now, it's wonderful. But so yeah, I think one of the things I think worth highlighting too is even there's still a semblance of joy in Appa even after he's experienced one trauma or two traumas. Like there's still joy there. And I'm specifically talking about the moment that at least brings me a little bit joy. But when he's eating the cabbages.
Sneaking him behind
the guy's back, and he seems genuinely happy. He's like I'm getting food, and he's just and then gets one, and you are as an audience member, you're enjoying that moment.
Yeah.
And it's a reprieve from everything that you've kind of been experiencing, and immediately it turns into more trauma for him because the anger the guy feels because. I would argue out of shame. I've been this animal has
very likely
has duped me. I'm gonna make him feel pain. And you lose those moments as the episode goes on. And it's terrifying. It's terrifying to see that light by the end of the episode is completely
we just see
gone.
Him...
There's no hope left in Appa.
There is. There's the end where he has hope. He's now been like
the whistle hits.
Well, it's like he's flying to Ba Sing Se. He knows where Aang is. Guru Pathik has shown him the way via his method. I don't know what you would call that, but his spiritual guidance, if you will. And he knows where Aang is. He hears the whistle. He's been duped again, right? After all this trauma that he's experienced, again, he is traumatized again by something he once trusted. So I'm curious to kind of take how does Appa react next episode and future episodes?
Well, the next time the whistle blows.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's fascinating. It's
less trusting of what's happening in those moments.
I know that I would be less trusting.
Well, we see that happen to him, right? Like Suki is Suki. Suki has never done anything to Appa, and yet because of his experiences, he is not trusting of her because of the way that people have treated him. And it's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And we know that it's having a physiological impact on what he's experiencing, not just from being whipped, not just from the boar cupine.
Well, it's changing the chemicals in his brain.
Correct. And the way that he experiences emotion and the way that he physically feels pain receptors.
One of the things that I found interesting was Azula bends blue fire. It is pretty clear that Appa isn't really scared of Azula until the tree that her fire catches on fire turns into normal colored fire. Mm-hmm. That's when he freaks out.
Yeah.
Did you notice that?
No.
So Azula's bending fire this whole time, and he's just, being Appa. And then as soon as the tree catches on fire, that's when he goes into a traumatized state where his body and mind is freaking out.
I think this is also another moment that might be worth highlighting because Suki lights a flame.
That's right.
When, very much like, what's the what's the movie? Airbuds him, or the old yellers him like, go, get away, like that whole thing.
Yeah.
And she's doing it for his own safety. But I'm wondering if he experiences that as traumatic. This is a person I just learned I can trust, and now she's swinging a fire flame at me.
Well, and that's like and if it is something where he's like hurt in this moment, would you say that Suki still should have done it?
From my perspective, yes.
Well, and I agree.
But that also is...
But that's a very interesting
to more trauma
argument.
For him.
Exactly. It's an interesting argument. Like, what's the greater good in this situation, right?
Because maybe he could have helped and taken down Azula. We've seen him use his power to save individuals multiple times, and he is clearly very powerful.
Well, and we could take this out of context, right? And if we just screenshotted Suki scaring Appa, we could easily say Suki is a bad person.
We would try not to, because we realize that a person and their actions aren't necessarily...
We have received a snapshot,
same.
but what happens in the media is people use snapshots to create stories and create complete stories based off one instance, right? And so I think it's worth highlighting that as well, to realize that even when people are doing what could be considered something that is not okay, i.e. using fire to scare Appa away,
you need context to have all
you need context. And in order to do that, you have to ask questions and be curious. Right? And so be curious is what I'm feeling called to be right now.
Well, it's interesting because that's where people say, like, there's two sides to every story. And, like, is there? Like, the side of the story is that Suki was protecting Appa by keeping him away from the situation.
I saw Suki, blah, 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 blah.
But with context,
yes,
you're like, it adds to it. So, there's a lot in this episode to dissect. And, for time's sake, do we need to wrap it up? Is there next?
I don't know. Where are we, Max?
Is there anything else we need to highlight?
How far along are we?
We just hit the 27-minute mark.
Oh, we got plenty of time.
Let's go.
I thought so too. Let's just keep this going forever.
What else do we need to highlight from this? Because I think as we highlight Guru Patik.
Yep.
There's the way that he creates the container, the way that he speaks to Appa, the way that he holds him accountable, and then uses him and lifts him up as kind of a resource of, I need you to do this.
But
is a really cool
asks
moment.
for permission.
Yes.
It's like, hey, may I
tie this
to your horn?
Yeah.
Right? And I think that respecting those boundaries is something that we see modeled there that is really, really important. It's really cool how, like, this is a kid's show. And we're having this conversation about a children's television show. It's fascinating. I'm in love with the show. It's wonderful. The lessons are unending.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's a very adult show with very adult themes.
Yeah.
So it's right in there for everybody. Here's a moment for me that I thought was interesting.
We'll go to yours.
The way the boy at the carnival is spoken to by the older adult.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Makes you assume that there could be traumatic experiences going on there. Stay here. Don't go anywhere near that beast, or there'll be some serious consequences when I get back here.
Yeah.
Which, just in the way that he says that, like, he could be viewing that as, I'm going to lead with fear here and make sure that he doesn't go near this thing. Or is that like was there a better way to do that? Or is there potential abuse in that relationship?
Or
there's a lot of leaps to go there.
Or are we taking this out of context and just seeing one snapshot of this really loving dad, right?
Except that we get another snapshot when the boy stands up and says, fly away. The dad, like, grabs him by the shoulder physically and yanks him back down onto the seat.
Yeah. So I said that just because I do agree with you. I wonder.
Well, let's add more context.
So,
let's
but
put the pieces together.
So, and I think it's worth being curious, right? What if? But with that context and with all the information that we have been provided, my deduction is similar in that one of the things I love about this boy is he sees in Appa what I wonder if it's something that he wishes he could do.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Flying away.
could he fly away?
Yeah.
How could he get out?
Well, and the compassion he has that he sees the struggling creature, and even after being
That's
told,
hungry
like,
and
even after being told, like, you're gonna get it.
Yeah.
If I see you near that thing, he's willing to kind of take the risk to still feed him.
Yeah.
Which is a really cool moment again
It is.
of hope and joy. And how he roots for Appa to fly away and get away throughout the course of this thing. So,
Yeah.
but that's a moment I think worth highlighting. Is just that one. Those you see those two of them, right? The two interactions between what we assume is likely Dad, and two moments that kind of point to signs of potential trauma.
Yeah. There's just a lot.
Can you also the trauma that could come from waking up in a cage after not going to sleep in one?
Like, Appa was drugged against his will. He was kidnapped. He was caged. He was starved. He was whipped with fire. When he escapes and tries to eat, he was eaten. He ate a cactus because he couldn't find food.
Mm-hmm.
He was then trying to track Aang down, chased by vulture wasps. He got honey all over him. He's not able to get clean because he's in a desert, so his hair gets matted.
Mm-hmm.
Tries to find food and shelter wherever he can.
It's chained while a lot of this is happening.
He's chained currently.
Yep.
And so he's trying to just find food, finds a hay barn, finally falls asleep from exhaustion, wakes up to a pitchfork in his face, and then again, that re-experiencing flames and fire, lands, just wants to go to sleep, and is immediately charged by a porcupine, taken down. Did you notice how like big that porcupine was compared
It's very similar to his size.
Yeah, that was huge,
massive,
and like it's just like thing after thing after thing. It's incredible what he goes through in this in this entire episode. It's so much. God, it's just it's so much. Can we talk about Zula?
Yes.
I wonder if she's experienced trauma in her life.
Sure, I would say so.
Tell me, like, what's your deduction to get there?
Could it be traumatic if you feel like your mother doesn't love you?
So that was
Like,
mine
that's
too.
where I go to that, so it doesn't have to be like a physical abuse, but like
So trauma with a little t.
If you are not getting the love you need to be successful,
So you move towards the love that you
get from someone
get
else.
from the quote love, not maybe potential actual love, but like the recognition and
that you're searching for.
that you're searching
And we
for.
see that from Zuko, but Azula's probably achieved that more with Ozai at this point.
Yeah, and it's just I wonder if Azula is the way she is from seeing the difference between how she is treated by her mother and how Zuko is treated by their mother.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. We have very little context there, but I wondered that, and it would help me understand her motives and actions a little bit more if that were true. So maybe I'm just like looking, maybe it's a confirmation bias, but
Well, the empathy and still holding people accountable.
yeah,
Right,
like this
so-
does not excuse anything, but it's definitely, it would give me more information and help me understand it a little more.
Yeah. I mean, how do we just assume the best, right? Or what's the most generous assumption we can make? And I don't know if the most generous assumption is, oh, she was probably abused. But I think that
Yeah.
like, that's not, we're not saying go around and like anytime someone's mean being like, they were likely abused.
Or if someone was driving poorly, just saying, oh, they probably have dementia.
Right. Exactly. What's the most generous assumption we can make in these situations? Yeah.
But it is saying, I wonder if they've potentially had a traumatizing past that is causing this behavior. And then what's the most compassionate way I can treat them under that potentiality, right? Because why the trauma is evident when Suki sees Appa. It is visible, right? Like he has his hair matted, he has porcupine spines all over his body. He's dirty, like he is like in a
Terrified.
terrified. Exactly. Whereas Guru Pathik sees him and he looks clean, like he doesn't have chains on, but he still recognizes by his behavior
that he's gone through some
that
things.
he is experienced. Like all he sees is angry Appa, right? He sees angry Appa, and so he still reacts in a way that is calm, patient, compassionate, right? And so I think sometimes when we see that negative behavior, we need to pause, not get defensive, say, I wonder what's causing this, and then master that story.
Yeah.
Right? Master that story that says, oh, they're just a jerk, and say, I wonder what's going on here.
And he creates that safe container so that healing can take place.
Yeah.
Which, again, he's in a position of privilege when he does that, right?
Absolutely.
Like, he knows he has the understanding, he has the trust that he's not actually going to be hurt physically. So he's got the ability to do that. And I think it's always important we have to recognize that safety is a position of privilege to be able to do that.
Yep.
Any other things that we want to highlight with this episode, knowing that we probably could dive way more into it, but not having the expertise around it?
Yeah, I feel like we might have already crossed some scope issues, but it's just one of those things where, again, we're doing our best.
We're learning as we go through. So a lot to dissect here, and what is one of the most heartbreaking episodes of Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Yeah, I get why people skip it.
Yeah, there's a lot of moments.
But hey, y'all, you can't skip it every time, because one of the things that makes this whole series so good is the fact that there are such low lows, right? You can't experience the high highs without having experienced the low lows. I'm just saying.
Mm-hmm. Max, you got anything you want to add?
Not at this time.
Okay, great. We are going to take a quick break, and then we will come back for our practice of the week and also for our devotion, which we will be looking at through the element of water. We'll be right back.
Water boy.
All right, and we are back, and we are going to start with Florilegia. Did I say that correctly?
You sure did.
Oh, perfect. And this is a moment where we both kind of picked out quotes that shine to us, that sparked something in us, and we're going to share each of those right now and see how they interact with each other, but also understand the context of what was going on in the story, and really see how it shifts our view of what was happening this episode. Did I give that correctly?
I thought you did very well.
Thank you, Ben. Ben, why don't you start?
And if you are careful, you won't get burned.
What's happening in this moment?
So this is the what would be a lion tamer circus guy, except it's the Appa tamer, fire whip man. And he's saying, you will perform for the circus, and if you are careful, you won't get burned.
Okay. And what does that make?
That's what's literally happening.
Yeah, so what does that make you feel?
I hate it. I think people in positions of power sometimes say things that, and if you're careful, you won't get burned. Where I'm like, I shouldn't be in this situation at all.
Yeah, right.
You are putting me in this situation where I will get burned. You are forcing me to tread carefully. You are putting me in a position, like that whole.
And then you're pretending it's my fault when
I get burned.
When I get burned.
That's
or something
right.
Bad happens.
Oh! I just seethed when I heard that, and I just, it makes me sick. So that's why I picked it. It stood out to me.
Yeah. I don't like it.
I don't like it at all.
I get an icky feeling. And you hate that character so much. There's so much anger that you have, especially when... yeah. All right.
Yeah.
My quote.
Yep.
You're not prettier than we are.
Oh, I know exactly where that's from. Ty Lee.
Yeah.
I like that was vicious.
Yeah. And like I think what stuck out to me was because I was so confused. Is like how
Where did that come from?
why? Yeah, like why that moment? And I know that at that moment they're kind of like making fun of the Kyoshi Warriors for wearing their makeup, which we know is this really powerful thing for them.
Yeah.
Of representing Kyoshi and all that means when you put on that makeup and that uniform, what that represents.
The pride,
to those
the honor,
warriors.
yeah.
And so for them to say something along the lines of like, you're so colorful, and then Ty Lee, as she's punching someone, right after she finishes punching them, like, you're not prettier than we are. And I was just so confused as to like,
it makes me question like
why does I don't get it.
So what's the most generous assumption we can make?
Yeah.
Right? And
I don't know. Like, I just don't know what's happening there.
I wonder if Ty Lee has body positivity issues. I wonder if she questions her body and is curious about, or maybe that's not the right word, but is
like it feels shame around
feels.
it.
I wonder if
don't
there's
know.
some shame around
so
makeup in general,
I'm physically dominating you, and I also need to feel like I'm physically. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like it's such a confusing thought, and I feel like for me, it's like one of those moments where I have to justify for my own ego or sense of self this moment of like I've got to prove to myself that I'm better than you to feel better about something, right?
Yeah.
I attribute it back to like an ex-girlfriend with the new boyfriend.
Yep.
And that moment of like, I'm better looking than he is.
Yeah.
Right?
Well,
like,
I mean, we're most judgmental of others.
Exactly.
In areas where we are judgmental of ourselves.
And I think where the interesting is like it'd be interesting to do that after I hit the guy like that, then make that comment. So it just seems like there's a lot going on there.
You know,
it
like,
just seems so out of place. But
it seemed out of place,
like,
and out of
what
character
caused that?
in a way. Like for some reason, it seemed out of character. But I wonder if this is there's a you're right.
Someone please email us with your opinions on why all that went down, because
theories, opinions.
I
thoughts.
don't know. I don't know why that happens in that moment, and I don't know if I'm equipped to talk about it. And that seems like, because it seems like such a personal comment to make in that moment, and I'm just I want to know more. But yeah, that's why that moment stuck out to me.
So we have two interesting quotes.
So let's put them together.
Let's see what happens when we put them together. All right, I want to read it exactly. And if you're careful, you won't get burned.
You're not prettier than we are.
Ooh. Oh man.
That almost makes it seem like intentional, like I'm going to prove to you that you're no good, or like you're not as good as you think you are. Like I'm going to hurt you, maybe leave a scar, and make you feel like
interesting.
You're less than I am.
Oh, so yeah. So like, and if you're like, for me, it's like and if you're careful, you won't get. This is like Mean Girls. Mean Girls talking. You won't get burned in the burn book, right? And
we've talked some Mean Girls recently. It's a wonderful watch as you're stuck at home. But
yeah, that's what comes up for me. That's interesting. Like you won't get burned, and like that, not literally burned in this situation for me, but you won't get like taken down by my power, right? Because I control the situation.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm better looking. I have the power.
Exactly. Yeah. That's interesting.
All right, now let's switch it.
Let's see what happens when we reverse it.
You're not prettier than we are.
And if you're careful, you won't get burned.
Yeah, it almost plays the same for me. I feel like it's still the same sentiment. I'm in control, and if you want to be like us, if you want to be like me, you better play your cards carefully. Is kind of how that comes.
Do it one more time. Read it again.
You're not prettier than we are.
And if you're careful, you won't get burned. You know, my mind just went somewhere else. So, content warning, I'm going to talk about slave trade and, forced prostitution. But I wonder if when you are in a situation where there is sex trafficking and someone is doing their best to survive and get away, they could be shamed and put down. Sometimes when you don't think you can beat the system, you think you have to be in the system the best you can. And you're not prettier than we are. You don't have what makes you more better than we are to be in this situation, right? And if you're careful, you won't get burned, right? That's where my mind went. Thoughts?
Yeah, I think there are moments of trauma when you feel like you're stuck in trauma, and we've talked about that before with the studies with the dogs that they were shocking, and then even when they opened the door to the crate, they weren't leaving. And I think that kind of plays into that is if I need to survive the system because I don't feel like I can get out of that, when it comes to my survival, I'm willing to
just
be at other people's
It's just
expense.
the idea of if you play it safe, you might not get burned, but if you don't take the risk, you're going to get continuously burned. And so it's interesting. That's what came up.
There's so many moments in this that it really requires the experience of so many other people and how they hear these quotes and how they feel on trauma. We would love to hear from you.
Yeah, I think that's where my mind went because we just spent a long time talking about trauma. So, yeah.
So, hit us up, thearchive@gmail.com. Send us a voicemail with your thoughts. And we'll love to share that with others because, again, Ben and I aren't experts, and this is something we're growing together at as we learn. Let's jump into the devotion.
Devotion time.
When it comes to the element of water, and as we're thinking about trauma, what's something you would like to do this week?
So for me, I am quick to judge. I'm a judger. I'm an INFJ. J stands for judgment, and I am quick to judge. And I know this about myself, and yet that awareness does not mean that I am better at managing it. It just means that I'm more aware, and yet not aware enough. So one of the things that I want to do better and grow in is when I start to get defensive because of an assumption that I have made or a judgment that I have made, I want to get better at pausing and changing the state that I am in. So if I am feeling like ice and solid, I want to try to see what it would be like to respond in a more fluid way. Or if I'm being a fluid, maybe I need to be maybe I need to be a gas. And so I want to be flexible like water is and respond the way the situation needs me to respond rather than the way my body and my mind is making me think I need to respond. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Really, solid, gas, liquid, water's able to be what it needs to be, and you want to be that in situations that, especially where you're feeling defensive.
I just want to meet people where they are rather than me being where I am and they being where they are and us trying to communicate because it's easier to communicate when we're in the same place.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I think for me, I really want to take a page out of Guru Patik's book of the way that he creates a container.
I love that. I already love it.
And I think we see him go with the flow, the way that we would want water to kind of hit the path of least resistance.
That's so true.
And so I think that that's my goal for the way that I work with others this week.
I like yours.
Thank you. It took me a long time to think of it. I was really working. But I think people that I love in this episode, Suki and then Guru Patik, I think are both deserve praise for the way that they handle these situations as they come to them.
Absolutely.
Max, anything you want to add?
Not at this time.
Okay.
Good talk.
Thank y'all so much for sticking with us on this episode. And
this was a heavy one.
It is a heavy one, and we really do want to hear from you because we know that this is something where it requires the experience of everyone to have an understanding of things and grow and learn. And so reach back out to us. Follow us on Twitter at bnb_pod. Same handle for Instagram. Reach out to us at thearchive@gmail.com. And if you would like to support us, patreon.com/thearchive. As little as $1 donation a month gets you a bunch of bonus content and archived episodes of other podcasts that the Archive puts on. So please go to Patreon if that's something you feel inclined to do. Ben, thank you for co-hosting this with me this week. Max,
I love it.
thank you for producing. I am Sunshine Mayfield.
Ben Pruitt.
And thank you all so much for listening to Bending Not Breaking.
Goodbye.